Hello and welcome back to History with Shahzad. There was a time when the Mughal Empire shone brighter than any empire in Asia. It was a golden age, a period of immense power, wealth, and cultural magnificence that stretched from the heart of Delhi all the way to Kabul, and from the lush plains of Bengal to the rugged Deccan Plateau. For centuries, the Mughals ruled with a strength and splendor that was truly unmatched in history. They weren't just conquerors. They were architects of a civilization, patrons of art, and stewards of a vast, diverse land. But as history teaches us, every empire, no matter how powerful, no matter how glorious, carries within it the seeds of its own downfall. The story of the Mughal Empire's fall isn't a sudden, dramatic collapse. It's not a single event, but a slow, agonizing decay, a story built from the bricks of pride, the poison of betrayal, the relentless hunger of greed, and the unstoppable march of time itself. It has a tale of how a brilliant star that once illuminated the world slowly faded into twilight, leaving behind a legacy that continues to shape our lives today. Join us as we uncover the intricate saga of how this magnificent empire crumbled from within and without. Our story begins with a figure of immense complexity, Aurangzeb, the last of the truly great Mughal emperors. He was a brilliant military commander, a pious and disciplined ruler, but a man burdened by endless, draining wars. For nearly 50 years, Aurangzeb's reign was a whirlwind of constant conflict. He fought to suppress rebellions across his vast territories. He clashed with emerging regional powers and even waged war against his own blood to secure the throne. His ambition was to consolidate Mughal dominance over the entire subcontinent, a goal he pursued with relentless determination. But while he was on the battlefield, fighting for absolute control, the very foundations of the empire beneath him were beginning to crack and bleed. These perpetual wars were incredibly expensive. The royal treasury, once thought to be limitless, was drained to fund his massive armies. Cities and provinces, exhausted by constant demands for resources and manpower, grew weary. And most critically, the sense of unity that had bound the diverse peoples of the empire together began to fray. Aurangzeb's rigid policies, while intended to enforce order, often alienated vast segments of the population, sowing seeds of resentment that would blossom into open revolt long after he was gone. After Aurangzeb's death in 1707, the empire was left without a strong, unifying leader. What followed was a chaotic and destructive power vacuum. The throne became a prize to be fought over, not inherited peacefully. His sons, hungry for the power their father had wielded, immediately turned on one another. Brother fought brother in a series of bloody civil wars that further weakened the central authority. The imperial court, once a center of administrative genius, devolved into a snake pit of intrigue and conspiracy. Powerful ministers and ambitious nobles, seeing the weakness at the top, began to play their own dangerous games, carving out personal fiefdoms and manipulating the princes for their own gain. And as the Mughal court was consumed by this internal strife, its enemies outside the palace walls grew stronger, bolder, and more confident, patiently waiting for their moment to strike. And strike they did. From the rugged hills of the Deccan, the formidable Marathas, once a regional nuisance, rose to become a dominant military power, challenging Mughal authority right at its doorstep. In the fertile lands of the north, the Sikhs, forged into a powerful military brotherhood, consolidated their strength and carved out their own kingdom in the Punjab. And far away, arriving not as conquerors with swords and armies, but as merchants with contracts and ledgers, a new and insidious force entered India. They came quietly, establishing trading posts along the coasts, seemingly harmless. This was, of course, the British East India Company. Initially focused on commerce, they slowly and masterfully exploited the internal chaos of the subcontinent, transforming their economic influence into political and military dominance. Yet amidst this slow-motion collapse, the Mughal court seemed to exist in a bubble of blissful denial. In the magnificent halls of Delhi, life went on. Festivals were celebrated with pomp and splendor. Poetry gatherings, or masharas, continued to enchant the elite, and music filled the air. The emperor and his nobles were surrounded by the trappings of power, the rituals of majesty, and the echoes of a glorious past. But it was a facade. The empire they believed they still ruled was fading like a candle in the wind. By the early 1800s, the reality was stark. The Mughal emperor had become a king in name only. His authority barely extended beyond the walls of his own palace in the Red Fort. He was a ruler without a rule, a sovereign without sovereignty, living as a pensioner under the protection and control of the very powers that had usurped his dominion, first the Marathas, and then, decisively, the British. The empire had forgotten it was falling until it had already fallen. Then, in 1857, one final desperate spark of resistance ignited across northern India. It was a firestorm of rebellion. Indian soldiers, the sepoys, along with civilians from all walks of life, princes, peasants, and artisans, rose up together. They fought for freedom, for their honor, and they rallied under the banner of the Mughal crown, seeing it as the last symbol of a united, independent India. This great revolt was the empire's last stand. But the rebellion, though fierce and widespread, was ultimately crushed by the superior organization and ruthless efficiency of the British forces. The final blow fell upon Delhi. The Red Fort was besieged and captured. The last Mughal emperor, Bahadur Shah Zafar, an elderly poet king, was captured, tried for treason, and exiled. He died alone and heartbroken in a foreign land, far from the magnificent cities and grand palaces his ancestors had built and ruled. With his exile, the flame of the Mughal Empire was extinguished forever. The Mughal Empire may have fallen, its political power erased from the map, but its shadow, its legacy, lives on forever. It is woven into the very fabric of our modern world. We hear its echoes in our language, with countless words from Persian and Turkic origins enriching our vocabulary. We see its grandeur in our cities, in the timeless architecture of the Taj Mahal, the majestic Jama Masjid, and the imposing Lal Qila. We feel its influence in our art, our music, our cuisine, and our culture. Empires fall, dynasties vanish, but history remains. It is a constant reminder of the heights we can achieve, and the fragility of all human endeavors. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey through a pivotal chapter of history. If you found this story as fascinating as we do, please consider liking this video and subscribing to History with Shahzad for more stories that shaped our world. We'll see you next time.